So what does the farmer need? An assessment of where you need supplemental nitrogen, an assessment of how much effort it's worth to get that applied. You know, some people have sprayers that they could convert. Some people might be arranging custom nitrogen. They might be getting a service provider to come in with a sprayer on drops. They might be getting a plane to come in. For most of these people, this is not, it's trouble, and they need to know how much trouble it's worth to handle that trouble. And really that comes down to how many dollars am I losing, and secondarily, how much nitrogen should I apply? And this is where remote sensing comes in my opinion. Here's an example of just prioritizing. You can pretty easily see the field that should be high priority. That's the one that something should be done on right away. There's some fields that are medium priority, and then there's some fields that are low priority. Maybe it would be profitable to do something, but probably not. So step one is prioritization. Step two is diagnosis. Here's the aerial photo taken on June 24th. Here's a yield loss map that we made from that, predicted from that. And I apologize that the scale is so small, but yellow means 30 to 60 bushels. So you can see that in this eastern wing of the field, there's a lot of 30 to 60 bushel losses, and up here, and then over here in this northwestern corner. Also in the very southern corner, but that area is so small it probably wouldn't make sense to treat it. How did this compare? Well, based on the actual yield monitor data, we had the patterns all right. The area along that eastern wing, especially the northeastern part, really needed it. This area in the northwestern corner needed it. The rest of the field probably was not a moneymaker. So the prediction map was not perfect, but it would have allowed the producer to make essentially all the right decisions at the time when those decisions would make money. One thing I'll call your attention to in this photo is the narrow stripes. This is a producer who used anhydrous. I can't remember how wide his bar is, but those are stripes because he had some distribution issues with his anhydrous bar. One of the things about this is it has an impact on what resolution image you might need and how that'll perform, and especially with setting your reference color values, because some of the darkest corn is probably the areas on that bar that were getting over applied. Here's another example from Western Illinois. Go from the aerial photo to predicted yield loss, average 41 bushels per acre in this case, clearly a need to treat, and predicted nitrogen need, applicator ready, putting the most nitrogen on the most stressed areas. So that's kind of the sequence. First you got the photo, then you've got the yield loss prediction where you decide, yes, I need to do something, or no, I can get by without it. And then if you need to do something, stick a applicator ready map into a machine and go and get the nitrogen put in places that make sense. How does it work? Calibration. Right now we've got this based on 7 fields with nitrogen stress, late June aerial photos, and yield maps. And this is how those 7 fields came out. The relative green, that's the green compared to the darkest corn in the field, was strongly related to how much yield loss there was. The more green light coming off that corn, the lighter it is, and the more yield loss there was. And these 7 fields did not all behave exactly the same, but you can see that they were pretty darn similar. So what we did was combine them into one relationship where all 7 fields go in there, and we use this equation up here to make our yield loss predictions. This is a similar calibration on some rate experiments with aerial photos, and from that rate experiments we can measure what the optimal N rate was, relate that to the relative color, and again use the equation of this line to predict how much nitrogen to apply at different parts of the field. So this will kind of step you through the analyses. This is a field that has a wide range from bare soil there to highly stressed yellow corn there to excellent dark green corn there. And so how does this play out? Well, first you get the image, and this doesn't quite capture the entire field in this image, but because it's such an extreme example, it's one that we've used. You create your field boundary, and then the next step is to get rid of the bare soil, because these bare soil areas, if you just follow the math, they would get very high nitrogen rates, which wouldn't make sense. So we use the green to red ratio to identify whether an area is soil or plant, And those are the areas where either, the pink areas show either areas that are they're predominantly soil. There may still be live plants there, but we can't say that with confidence just from the image. So those are areas that we kind of leave out of the analysis. And you can see that there's still an awful lot of stressed but live corn showing in the image where there's a decision that needs to be made. So then we've got to establish what color should this corn be, because everything is based on that yardstick. What should the corn be? So our normal procedure, if we feel that there's enough corn in the field that's still sufficient, and normally there is, we'll take the darkest 20% and get the median of that. And that's what we're showing here. So I'll back up one image so you can look again at what the corn looks like in that photo and see where these darkest areas are showing up. And that's how we're saying, okay, this is what this hybrid looks like at this growth stage with enough nitrogen. And everything else is based on a comparison to that. So it's an internal reference. That's the concept that we're working with here, is that we've got some corn that has enough nitrogen or whatever other crop it is, and we're going to compare to that. And from that relative degree of stress, we're going to do our diagnosis. And the first diagnostic step is how much yield are we losing? The dark blue areas below 15 bushels per acre, I would say, are not going to be economical to treat. The light blue areas gets into the first that's economical to treat. That's a pretty small area. The orange and green are the areas where you'd really want to treat. You're looking at 30 to 60 bushels of loss, and they're quite substantial in terms of acres. And the question of exactly how to do this comes down to the producer and what options they have available. But clearly there's a bunch of areas that are going to be profitable to get rescue nitrogen on in this field at the time this image was taken, which was in late June, maybe June 20th, June 24th. So one way would be to send a ground-based or a plane-based variable rate application, and there's quite a few planes that can do this now as well. And so we create a somewhat coarser grid that more reflects a reasonable scale of the applicator, and a nitrogen rate map that's putting the most nitrogen on the yellowest corn, which may never catch up, but which will give, in our research, according to our research, the biggest yield response. So that kind of outlines the entire process with that field. If there's anything else you want to say, Ed, this could be a good time to step in, or if there's other questions.
I'll quickly... no other questions.
Should I just proceed then?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, so everything I've done has been with images acquired from planes. I started with film cameras, moved to digital cameras. They seem to work essentially identically. The kinds of digital numbers you get off of both of them after you've scanned film or just going directly to digital with the camera, they seem to be very similar. I think satellites will work fine. I think there needs to be actual development and testing work to make this work with satellites. We need to be pretty sure before we send it out there that that we've got it fine-tuned so that it does what we want it to do, but I'm nearly certain that it'll work. It's just a question of doing that development and testing work until we've got it right. There may be some resolution issues. I don't think that the 20-meter resolution satellite imagery is going to be okay, but the 5-meter or certainly the 3 or 1 meter should be fine. The sensitivity, when I say that, I may not be using correct remote sensing jargon, but what I mean when I say that is what's the scale as you go from a dark image to a light image on that object, and how does the math behave? Because I'm not really familiar with it, but the little bit that I've seen, it seems like it may be fairly different than what you get out of a regular camera, and so you have to adjust to that. It can be done, I'm sure. Interference, I'm talking about clouds and gases in the atmosphere and so on there, and I think there's a lot of techniques that deal with that, and that can all be overcome. Timeliness has been the biggest issue with using satellites for agriculture, and we're getting better and better on that. So I think satellites is going to be an important tool for making these kinds of nitrogen diagnoses and decisions because of how much territory you can cover, how quickly. But that because of these issues, there may be times and places where plane-based systems have to be part of the answer too. So, kind of stepping back a little, can it be done? Well, assessing potential yield loss due to nitrogen stress, yes, that can be done with remote sensing. Getting profitable response to late or rescue nitrogen applications, yes, that can be done at least in corn. I think it can be done in wheat with a narrower time frame. Other crops, I'm not quite so sure, but my guess is with many crops, we can go later than people think we can go. Assessing the nitrogen rate needed, yes, we can do that. There's a clear relationship there between the rate needed and what you see with a sensor, an image, or a ground-based sensor. The logistics of getting the nitrogen applied in a big region with equipment that's currently available may be the biggest holdup at this point, and the second biggest holdup would be getting people to decide that they really need to do this. They're not used to buying this service. They're not used to using this kind of management. But I think there's easily enough money in it, the way things have gone the last 4 years, and really even before that. There was enough money to make it worthwhile to producers, the people who are putting on the nitrogen, the image service providers, and anyone else that needs to help out to make the whole thing happen. It is tricky to get all the groups working together. I think consultants could likely be a key cog. In some cases, maybe some big organization would be key to making all the parts come together. But because the need is ephemeral, if you're looking at rescue, you may not necessarily need it in the same place every year. So building those ongoing marketing relationships, who we're going to put this on the ground through, can be an issue unless the organization that's doing it actually has a presence across a large geography on the ground. So how do we get it done? I'm just going to show you a few pictures of some of the actual machines that I've worked with, but basically any way that it can get done is a good way. If a crop needs nitrogen, I don't care how you get it on, you're going to make money. High clearance spinner applying dry nitrogen is very attractive from the point of view of speed. You can cover about 2 acres a minute with one of these things. Cost is about $5 an acre, and you can really fly with them. A high clearance sprayer can get it done. And that last machine I showed was just dribbling the nitrogen, not dropping it between the rows. If you feel that there's clearly an advantage to getting it down in the ground, here's a machine that will do that. And I've worked with a number of producers that have these. They've done a lot of custom work the last 3 or 4 years for their neighbors, and all of them that I know have charged $10 an acre. In our boot heel, where aerial applicators are well established, they charge about $7 an acre to apply nitrogen at a rate of 100 pounds of urea per acre, 46 pounds of actual N. I'm sure it would be more than that if they're not local and they're having to set up staging in your area after traveling from somewhere else, but very reasonable prices for the size of benefit that you're going to get. One other piece of information that applies is, are you going to burn your crop? And what we found was, especially on a big crop with ammonium nitrate, we're losing quite a bit of yield due to burn with ammonium nitrate, an astronomical amount with solution broadcast. You've got to get solution down between the plants. And with urea broadcast, even on 4-foot tall corn, which is nearly full canopy, and I'm guessing other crops would probably react similarly, but I wouldn't put a lot of acres out there without knowing for sure. The urea burn could sometimes look ugly, but in our experience, it didn't cost much in terms of yield. Now, we were using material where we didn't have a lot of dust in it. I would be concerned with some of the urea that's out there that's very dusty with putting on high rates of that. But this was 150 pounds of actual N, and we got very little loss with that urea. So broadcasting is fast and effective, and urea is the best choice. If you're looking at a short crop, you should use Agrotane. Once you get on a tall crop, there's essentially no wind down at the bottom of that canopy, and it's really no longer an issue.